Good afternoon. This is Mark Chailloux from Schlafen der Hase, the company who invented TVT, the text verification tool. But don't worry, today I'm not here to talk about TVT specifically. My presentation is how to vaccinate your workflow to eliminate labeling errors. And before we start, quickly, whenever you have any questions, please type them in the chat functionality of the webinar. And at the end of the session, I will be trying to answer any question that you may have raised. So I make two promises in this presentation because we are towards the end of the day for some of us, and therefore I will try to make this as informative as possible, but also I will try to make this entertaining to make sure I keep you until the end. So the agenda. Preventive measures. We are talking about ensuring that we don't have errors in our labeling material. And the first step would be to ensure that you clean up your manuscripts. The next step would be to eliminate bugs in your artworks. So this is the beginning of the process. You want to make sure you start with something clean. Otherwise, if you put error in, you're going to get error out. Reducing ping-pong interaction is also something that is very important. The more back and forth you have between persons, the more likely additional errors are going to be introduced, or at the very least, this is very time-consuming. Nonetheless, even if you did everything you could at the beginning, you always run the risk that your artwork is infected with errors. So how can you make sure that you disinfect your artwork? So first, you can verify Braille in a single step. Braille is very important in Europe. It's mandatory for medicinal products for human use. Also in Spain, for example, it is now being introduced for veterinary products. You should also make sure that you understand your workflow and test for errors. And what would be the last step to prevent the spread of future misprints? So let's dig in directly, cleaning up your manuscript, preventive measures. So I often like to take this analogy that when you have a lock, there are maybe a lot of keys in your possession, but only one of them will typically be used to open that lock. And when you're typing something on your manuscript, in other words, when you're using your keyboard to type your Word file, you have a lot of choice for keys, and normally one of them is the correct one for every single character that you want to enter. So I'm going to show you a few examples of mistakes that I have seen, some of them numerous times. The degree sign. So when you write the degree sign for storage conditions, for example, you have the option to either insert the degree sign, which is the correct character. Another option that's on the second line, you can also insert the masculine ordinal indicator. Now you may notice this one looks very similar, but on the right hand side, I changed the font, and that's why it looks like it is underlined. It is actually not underlined. It just looks like this because masculine ordinal indicator is used for numbering purposes. Say if you are number 2, or floor 2, that's a type of character you would be using. That's the purpose of that character. Another way of doing this is to take the letter O and superscript that letter. Now, if the superscript is lost in the auto creation process, then you end up with something which looks very close to 250 Celsius. The last one is, instead of inserting O, you insert the number 0. If you do that, and during a copy and paste, the superscript is lost, you end up with 250 Celsius. So again, this is something I've seen more than once, unfortunately, in documents. Another example is the greater than or equal to. Do ensure that you actually insert the correct character and do not take what you have on your keyboard, which could be the greater than sign, because that you then underline, because if you do that, and again, the graphic designer is going to copy and paste. If the underline is lost in the process, then you end up with a different meaning than what you intended. So how do you do that? How do you ensure you're inserting the correct characters? So in Microsoft Word, you go into Insert Symbol. So don't always use what you have on the keyboard. On the keyboard, you have a limited number of keys, and it's not always the right ones. I go under Insert Symbols, and then here you can select the character. What is very important, you should look at the name. Every character has a name. So that one is called the degree sign. That's indication it is the correct one. Just for your information, that here would be the masculine ordinal indicator. So apart from the name, every character has a code. We'll get back to this a bit later. That's the Unicode. This is important, and you can see here it says Unicode. If it doesn't say Unicode here, you're on the wrong character. That means there is no guarantee that this character will always look like what you see on your screen. So make sure that it says Unicode, and make sure that the name here corresponds to what you think it should be. Tables, that's also another big topic, which can be a source of errors. Tables in documentation can be used for a lot of purposes, and the right way of inserting a table in your manuscript is insert a table, but an actual table. What I've seen a couple of times are customers who were just typing in the text in the Word file, and then they were using the layout functionality on Microsoft Word to design columns. The problem with this is because Word is not an artwork creation software, it's not meant to be used for layout purposes. What happens is if you change the font size or the font name, then what you have, which appears as in columns, is going to move. And when the graphic designer has copied and pasted the text in the artwork, this is exactly what happened. The lines were not in front of each other because it's not really a table, it's just columns. Another recommendation, so don't do that. Another recommendation is do not leave empty cells on your tables. If they are empty, there's a bigger chance that the content will move. So do leave either a 0 or a dash or not applicable or whatever you want, but whenever possible, do not leave empty cells on the table. Eliminating bugs in your artworks. So after the first step, let's assume everything was fine. Then comes the time of artwork creation. How do you make sure you don't get any bugs in there? Well, there's simple standards that should be followed. And the first one will be to ensure that you use a Unicode font. So Unicode is a standard that was agreed on by the software industry. Anybody can develop a font as long as you're following the Unicode standard. This font, you will be able to take this text, copy and paste it, and put it in another software, in another application, and the other application will be able to read that text. What I have here, which is nonsense, this is how it may look like if the font is not following the Unicode standard. So make sure you use fonts that are Unicode for the languages that you're typing. So you can have a font that is Unicode for French, but maybe not for Arabic. You also may have a font that is Unicode for Arabic, but maybe it's not Unicode for Cyrillic characters. So make sure it is Unicode in the languages for which you plan to use that font. So you may require to use several fonts for the several languages. Also, the fonts should be embedded in the PDFs. This is also something that makes it much easier to forward the file to someone else and ensure it will be displayed correctly. You should also ensure that invisible text layers are removed. You should not have invisible layers of text in a PDF because later on in the process, guess what? They may become visible and maybe that's not what you want. Do the correct text threading. So text threading means once the file has been created as an artwork, as a PDF, the way the order into which the graphic designer has copied and pasted the information is going to influence how computers will read the text. So if the text threading is not done correctly, and let's say you take your PDF and put it into a software to read out loud the content, it will read in the order of which the graphic designer has done the copy and paste. And guess what? They typically will copy and paste first the body of the text, and often they will copy and paste later the titles, for example. So if they do the text threading, then they will tell the file to reorder technically, so the visual order, what we see, corresponds to the technical order. Next thing is to ensure that files are sent with selectable text for content approval. And this is an ISO recommendation. And yeah, let me go back on this. If you receive files which do not contain selectable text, ask your graphic designer to send you files with selectable text. They can do it, and they should do it. And yeah, that's very important. It will simplify your work later on in the process. Harmonized software versions and editions. What does it mean? Well, how can you expect to receive consistent work if the people who are creating the files are using different applications or different versions of the application? So I had a client who was trying to create files with Arabic text, and they were using the standard Illustrator version. Standard Illustrator version is fine for most languages, but if you want to work with right to left languages like Arabic, you need to have the Middle East edition. This is optimized for it. So they were not using it and they had a lot of problems. And after they implemented it, then magically everything was being created correctly. And latest version, or at least an actual version, another example, I had a customer, they were using an old version of Illustrator, and because of that, what was displayed on screen was the wrong colors. So if you printed the document, you would see certain colors, but on screen you got the wrong colors. How can you expect to create a proper artwork if what you see as a user is not what's technically in the file? So make sure you're using the correct versions. Harmonized technical color names. Again, that's also another source of errors. As a company, if you have suppliers in different locations, or if your offices are in different locations, different countries, you are probably going to have a lot of different names for the same colors. Let's say you have yellow. So maybe using a number for the yellow. Maybe you're calling it simply yellow. Maybe you're calling it amarillo, you're calling it gelb. You got the idea. All of this is a duplication, which again is a source of errors, and there's a big chance the graphic designer picks up the wrong one. So harmonize the colors. Another thing I can recommend is we've written some posts in there which I think would be of use to you. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn and have a look at these. I think they provide some simple information on recommendations for artworks. And do go to the Ghent Word group. They design standards for PDF, and they explain the ISO recommendations. So this is a must for any graphic designer in the pharmaceutical or medical device industry. Okay, so once the artwork is created, then there's another step, and that's the step where ping pong starts. And certainly, I love real ping pong, but that one is probably one sort of ping pong nobody really enjoys much. And the reduction of it is definitely something that will reduce stress, and that will also reduce the chance of error. So we're going to look at the real case of Michel, who is a proofreader and had an issue. So this happened a few years ago at actually a vaccine company. So Michel arrived today very early in the office. The reason for this is he has a new artwork to work on, or to proofread rather, for folding box, and also he's quite stressed because he's traveling today. And this is Bob from the graphic studio. So Bob is working since many years together with Michel, and he has been working already on the first version of this new folding box. So he's sending this to Michel, and Michel prints the information, closes bag, runs into the taxi, because as I said, Michel is also traveling. While he's in the taxi, he's having a look at the paper that he printed, and he's trying to find out if he has any mistakes in the first version. And this is a picture of Michel, of course. So this is the first correction, so not many surprises there. He finds some mistakes and he's asking, obviously, Bob to correct them. Then he arrives at the airport and he takes his flight from Ping to the famous city of Pong. And during that time, certainly Bob is working on the document and he's sending again the second version of the artwork. So while Michel lands and then goes again into the taxi, that was at the time traveling was still a possibility in our world. In the taxi, he's reading on his very small mobile device, a smartphone, the artwork. Certainly the artwork doesn't have much text, but it's a small screen. So he's looking in there and trying to see if he finds any mistakes. Unfortunately, he does find mistakes that require to be corrected again. So he's informing Bob once more. So you see, this is taking a bit of time. I'm making it last because I enjoy it. And here is where the audience is. So this is where Michel was going to the global regulatory affairs meeting that they were doing every year at his company. And during the presentations of his colleagues, he's looking, of course, at his emails, and he finds again that Bob is sending another version. Hopefully this is the last one. This is getting a bit tiring now. And this time, yes, it is the last one. Michel is now finally very happy that he got the file without any mistakes. So he approves it and the file continues its life and gets sent to the printer, and the printer prints thousands of times while Michel is going with his colleagues on a night out to celebrate the long workday. Unfortunately, there's a mistake. So the file gets printed thousands of times wrong. Exactly, wrong. So why is that? Because Michel, unfortunately, did not proofread the entire document. He only proofread where he was expecting the mistake. And the reason for this is because it's really complicated. This is the document on the left, a Word file that looks like following the QLE template as used in Europe for folding boxes. So this contains the instructions for what should go on the box. And this is more or less the instructions that the graphic designer receives. And that's page 1. Typically, you have at least another page, sometimes even 3. So this is complicated. And Michel should have then checked side by side the previous version, the one they sent with the comments, against the new one. But he didn't do that. Why? Probably because he was traveling, of course, because there's not so much text on the box. So he did not check the entire document. He only checked where he was expecting for a change. More specifically, he requested a change here. And the graphic designer, trying to be helpful, has changed the information on all the panels. And that was not what was required. It was required to be changed only on one of the panels. So that's the mistake. So how did this happen? If we recap, first, Michel was not in the office. This is not very often, but in that case, it was. Now we're never in the office anymore. There was only one proofreader. Sometimes companies have this 4 eyes policy where a second person is going to cross-check again just to be 100% sure. There were no clearly defined roles. I'm saying this because Bob was trying to help and he did change more than what was requested. This is usually nice, but in that case, it didn't help, certainly. And then again, the entire document was not checked, just partially. He only checked where he was expecting the change. Why? Well, who wants to check 3 or 4 times the same document again? Wrong verification process. He did not compare the files, but rather just looked at one document, not side by side. And then the conclusion of this is that, even the best ping pong player sometimes drops the ball. You cannot be 100% efficient all the time. And this is exactly what happened. So if you suspect that your artwork is infected, and I think in today's world, it's pretty clear we should always be suspicious and should always take all the preventive measures we can and act as if something was wrong and verify that. So first, how do we verify Braille? Well, it's very simple. Take the PDF, select the Braille, copy, and you open a notepad in your computer, so Windows Accessories Notepad, and paste. You can also do this with Microsoft Word, that works. Copy, paste. And what you will get is the text will be displayed. So here I have copy pasted this and I have Cesaris, that would be the name of our product, for example. And then this would correspond to the number and then the milligram. So the dash means that what comes next is not a letter, but a number. And A is the first letter of the alphabet, so that corresponds to 1. J is the 10th letter, which then corresponds to a 0. So this is how you can read that. And if the file that you are using, you cannot select the Braille, then ask your graphic designer to provide you with a version with the Braille selectable. They can always do that. Braille is just a font. To you and me, it looks like dots, but for a computer, it's a font, same as Times, New Roman, Arial, Calibri, and so on. It's just a font. So when you copy and paste, the computer knows and is pasting the Unicode and can display the text in a way that everybody can read. So another step that is very important, I've talked about Braille early in the process. Certainly you can also inspect Braille after when the document is printed, or should do that too. So there are a lot of different steps in the process, and I think it's important to recap all of them because they all involve typically different departments, different persons with different responsibilities. And if you want to use control software or systems, you need to use the right technology, and you're using typically different technology as well. So first, let's say we start with a manuscript. That is often a Word file, and then you want to make sure your content is correct. So you would use, to approve the Word file, you would use, for example, something that will allow you to check for content and to check for the meaning. So you're going to use, apart from your brain, and that's going to be the most important throughout, you will use something like a medical dictionary, and you can use something like TPT spelling to help you verify that the content is correct. Once the manuscript is approved, it is sent to the graphic designer, who will then proceed to create an artwork. In that case, what you want to verify, you want to check the PDF against the Word file, and you want to check this character by character, plus the Braille if applicable, plus images if there are instructions. Let's say again, taking a leaflet as an example, instruction on how to open the packaging, inject the drug, apply the cream, these sort of things. And to do this, you can use something like TPT. The next step would be the printer proof. So once this file is approved, then the printer will make some modifications, and then you want to verify the artwork that you just approved against the printer proof. The printer proof will contain additional information, so it corresponds to the right instructions for its printing press. So here you want to check the text, you want to verify that the layout is still the same, and you want to also verify you have the correct version of the document. Here you can use something like TPT artwork. TPT barcode is also something that's when you can check the barcode as well. The next step, once this is approved, then the document will get printed and someone will scan the document to verify that it is printed correctly. So you're comparing your PDF artwork against the scanned sample. So here you're verifying the print quality to ensure you have no major technical errors, and again that you have the correct version. And here you will need a scanner and you will need a pixel comparison software that is a bit different, because here you need to ensure that it can, let's say the paper is a little bit transparent, for example, maybe you have some varnish. All of these things need to be taken into account, and again the Braille needs to be verified there as well. So it's a little bit different in different camera systems and so on. And there are two main types of technologies in there. First, you need to verify that the text is selectable and it is Unicode based. This is how the technology will work for the first two steps in the process. Selectable text, and it's a Unicode based comparison. The next steps, this is an image comparison, and this is a pixel based system what you will be using. And this is very important because if you're using the wrong type of technology in the process, it just won't work. You won't get the result that you're expecting. Okay, preventing of future misprints. So to make this, to recap a little bit, it's pretty clear that proofreading is a very tiring job, and one mistake can have serious consequences. So it's very important using the right solution for that. We've heard about solutions being used to vaccinate against errors in workflows, and to vaccinate your workflow, you should use the TVT family of products. This is our recommendation. So thank you very much for your participation, and now it's time for questions. So if you have any questions, please type them in, and I will join in 1 second and read out any questions you may have typed in.